This episode has been brought to you in part by the Azrieli Music Prizes. Join them in celebrating artistic excellence at the AMP Gala Concert, live from Maison Symphonique in Montreal, happening October 20th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Orchestre Metropolitain will premiere award-winning music by laureates Aharon Harla, Iman Habibi, and Rita Ueda. Learn more at azrielifoundation.org/AMP.
Hey everybody, we're the Benchwarmers. I'm James, and my COVID-beleaguered partner Gabe is here with me. Gabe, can you murmur out a hi there?
Hello. I'm
You
better.
don't
than
seem
that.
that.
My voice is going to be a little husky today. A little. Let's get that smooth sound in your earphones. Yeah. I just got that COVID voice. Finally, it took 2.5 years, but it finally caught up to me.
Yeah, exactly. We're all told at some point that the COVID monster has come to us, and we just don't know when that's going to be.
For whom the bell tolls last, right now it is me, COVID bell.
I think it's gone full circle now that people who haven't had COVID, it's like, what's wrong with you? Do you not have friends? Do you not have a social life? Congrats to you for being so popular.
I've had a kid in daycare for 6 months, and yet I somehow avoided it until now.
Shocking. Anyways, we will keep it sweet and short for your benefit of not having to talk too much. But we do have a great podcast for you. Before Gabe got COVID, we did tape an interview with our sister podcast host, Avi Feingold, who hosts the Bonjour High podcast for the Canadian Jewish News. That's the sort of weekly news magazine podcast. Is that a fair way to put it?
I think so. They're sort of the flagship, general news, Bonjour High. The
CJN Daily, CJN Daily is like that's like the Daily, and Bonjour High is like This American Life.
Yeah,
and we're
that's right. It's This Canadian Jewish Life. And
we're the Bulldog Briscoe Gonzo Sports Show.
Big thanks to the kind Rebbe for giving us his time and his insight and his
So we talked
very
about
exciting halakhic interpretations.
Yeah, so we talked about the Jewish opinions and ideas about sports gambling, something we talked about a little while ago. Certainly, I think listeners anywhere in North America that sports gambling has recently been legalized have been blanketed wall to wall with gambling ads. And I guess the question is, if you're a Jew, should you be doing it? And how should you be doing it, etc.?
Are you going to open 5783 by placing, I don't know, some shekels on Team Israel to go far in the World Baseball Classic?
Sure. Did you already have a side bet going on about how long the tequila was going to hold, during Rosh Hashanah? Who knows? I mean, I think we got into it with Avi, and it's very interesting to hear his opinions.
How many blasts?
So stick around.
Can you bet on blasts, or do you bet on length? Because I know there's a set number of blasts, but they could throw in an extra like shavarim, and maybe he screws it up and his tongue gets in the way, and that third blast gets like a tiny fourth one on the end of it.
Well, this is the idea we'll have to think of some ideas for next year's of some parlays we'll have to offer to our listeners. Take some action. As Avi said, I mean, I think we come on the conclusion that it's somewhat kosher, and now we have a rabbi seal of approval. So please stick around for that interview with Avi. Before we get to that, we thought we'd do a little, sunrise, sunset. The MLB playoffs are coming on, and we should preview that a little bit, talk about the Jews who are remaining, and the other two big leagues that are starting up, NBA and NHL. So let's start with baseball, Gabe. As we're taping this, the Yankees, I'm sad to report, just beat the Guardians.
We have lots of Yankee fans who listen to this podcast, and first I would like to say shucks, and then second I would like to say congratulations.
The Yankees versus the Astros has really left me without a rooting interest. But we should say that
you're rooting for the meteor.
There are Jewish players on both teams.
Every remaining team, as a matter of fact, there's 4 teams left. We've got the Yankees, the Astros, the Phillies, and the Padres, and every team has a rooting Jewish interest. So hopefully we can help you decide which one is the least objectionable. Should we start with the Yankees Astros, Jamie?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Astros, of course, have standout third baseman and shortstop and outfielder extraordinaire Alex Bregman, who has been just playing great this year. It's been a real bounce back season, and he had a really solid, like classic Bregman campaign. Going into the postseason, he had a very solid ALDS 5 for 15 with a home run against the Mariners, and he's going to be a huge part of their team against the Yankees. So he's probably he's probably the best bet, I would say, of all the remaining players for who could win the World Series MVP.
Do we want a Jewish World Series MVP?
That good question. We should look into whether or not there's been any. I know I had that. There has been. I'm pretty sure because I've done the list of all the Jewish hardware and professional sports, and there has been.
So I can see it right now. Sandy Koufax has won it twice.
Right. Okay.
So Larry Sherry. Was Larry Sherry Jewish? I think he was.
Yeah, Larry Sherry was Jewish.
Larry Sherry has won it. Classic Mike Jacobs All-Star Mike Schmidt has won it. Another Mike Jacobs All-Star, Ben Zobrist has won it. Not Jewish, the two of them, but both, seem to suggest they would. David Eckstein, also we get asked about him a lot. Not Jewish, but you got to go pretty far back to find a Jewish World Series MVP winner. Oral Hershiser, another non-Jewish.
Okay, so some Mike Jacobs also, but Alex Bregman's probably the best bet. And then on the Yankees, outfielder Harrison Bader, who made his return after injury about a month ago, will be on the ALCS roster. And unfortunately, Scott Efros didn't make the ALDS roster or ALCS roster because he blew out his elbow. I mean, he needs Tommy John surgery now, which is too bad.
I'm sorry, my brain's not working because of the COVID. But what's the Yiddish name for Tommy John? Tamala.
Good question.
Tamala.
John is sort of like
Jonathan. Tamala Jonathan.
Yeah, Tamala Jonathan. Surgery on his
Tomer Jon.
It's not bad. So Scott Efros needs Tommy John, which I think we should mention is bad for. I think the anticipation was that he was going to be pitching for Team Israel in the World Baseball Classic in March, and certainly he's not going to be back from Tommy John surgery within 6 months.
Absolutely
so
not.
That's too bad.
But hopefully he'll be there to cheer the team on.
Yeah.
However,
and Harrison Bader should be
another Team Israel player will be there for the Yankees. Harrison Bader.
Yeah, that's right. So, he was on the roster obviously for the NLDS and had 3 home runs against the Guardians. I think he's, they're going to need his bat obviously to get over the Astros. Hopefully he can continue on that strong hitting streak. And we'll see if the Yankees can make the World Series. And who are they going to be up against? In the NL, we have the Philadelphia Phillies and the San Diego Padres. Now, a little less Jewish representation on this side.
But still Phillies, have some.
Yeah, but still some. Phillies backup catcher Garrett Stubbs is Jewish. People
the magnificently coiffed Garrett Stubbs. He has this beautiful, like, Jewish head of curly hair.
That's right. And people will probably remember him from the Houston Astros, where he played last year. In the last few years, he made it to the World Series with them when he was one of 4 Jews who made the World Series last year. So he's the backup catcher in Philadelphia. Don't think he's going to be playing a ton. Probably gets into an NLCS game at least.
Especially with the DH now. He could get a game or get a pinch running opportunity. He's a very fast runner.
Yeah, exactly. But JT Realmuto is as good a catcher as anyone. Basically, he's blocking him a little bit. So. Again, he might get into a game or two, as a pinch hitter, pinch runner, something like that. But who knows beyond that? And then on the Padres side, the Padres don't have any players who are Jewish, as far as we know. But their manager is the great Bob Melvin, along of the Oakland A's. And
yes, quite a baseball Melech coach.
Yeah. So Bob Melvin will be. Obviously never won one with the A's, but looking to bring the dads to the World Series and their first.
He's got
World
almost
Series. The Padres never won a World Series, have they?
No, they have not. So. And Bob Melvin has over almost 1,500 wins in his career. He's over 500 as a manager. Been managing pretty much constantly for almost 20 years now.
Wow!
So it'd be really spectacular to see him get that W. He's my favorite thing about Bob Melvin. Which is maybe the most Jewish thing about him, is he spends his off seasons living in like a little apartment in Greenwich Village, which is like quite Bob Dylan-esque. I quite enjoy it.
Yeah. So those are your Jewish rooting interests for Major League Baseball's playoffs of the 4 remaining teams. If you don't have anyone to root for, I mean, I guess I would choose Bregman and the Astros. Like they're probably, odds on favorite to win at this point. And it saves you from cheering for the Yankees, who are, of course, the spawn of evil in the world, and deserve to be contracted.
I'm going for the Padres. I think I'm rooting for the dads. You've got a Jewish coach coaching a team full of guys from every other team in the league. They don't have a single homegrown player on the NLCS roster. Literally not one. And they're a team named after, I guess, like a Franciscan or Catholic swinging friar.
That's true.
They're run by a couple of Jews. So
that's true.
Love
they're
to
in
see that.
Yeah. They're
Don't
in a city
tell
named
Kanye
after a saint. They're named for a Catholic friar, and yet they're run by a couple Jews. So
yet they're run by Jews. That's true. As a Diego yourself, you ever find do you find a rooting interest in San Diego?
In the San Diego? No, I don't think so. I mean, that would be like, do I root for a team from like Jamestown? If I guess that's a city, like the Virginia colony. I don't know. There's James things. I doesn't
Tiago, any sort of Tiago Diego.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's it for baseball. Let's just do a quick mention of hockey. There was a great rundown in the Jewish Telegraphic Agency by Evelyn Frick of all the Jewish NHL players to watch this season. I think this has been like the thing that we've mentioned time and time again. Is just like there's way more Jewish representation in hockey than there ever has been, and we don't know exactly like why we're in a golden age of Jewish hockey players, but we are.
We absolutely are.
The Hughes brothers, friend of the podcast, Zach Hyman, Norris Trophy winner 2 years ago, Adam Fox,
sort of real like nice Jewish boy energy. Jason Zucker.
Yeah, Luke Kunin recently joined the San Jose Sharks. Like up and down, there's Jews all over. So hopefully we'll have some people on as the year goes on to talk a little bit more hockey. I mean, I think the Hughes brothers are obviously really coming up, and the youngest one. I think is he in the league yet, or Luke, is he going to be in the league?
I think he may have finished at Michigan this year.
Okay.
Similarly, sort of another. He was drafted 4th overall. He seems to be. He's got one more year at Michigan. He has eligibility to play for, and then he'll probably come to the NHL. I would assume.
So maybe next year we'll be talking about Luke Hughes as a potential starter.
Exactly.
His first year
on the Devils. Similarly, I think we can expect Northeastern Canadian Olympic star Devin Levy to show up in Florida sometime soon. He's sort of the heir apparent there, and he's already been drafted and will probably be coming up soon. So we'll keep.
And we should say to our local listeners, people from Canada who are listening to this podcast. You can stop rooting for your team at any time. They're not going to win. You can actually give up being a Leafs fan. It will absolutely improve your health, your quality of life. You'll sleep better. Food will taste sweeter. You can do it. And if you want to root for someone instead, root for some Jews. You can just pick up.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, it's the easiest thing in the world. Every year, look at who the Jewish players are, make a list. Cheer for them, their teams. When they make it to the playoffs, cheer for those guys. Stop rooting for the Leafs. Stop rooting for the Canadians. My dear God, please stop rooting for the Senators. And you will feel better. Western Canada, okay, your teams might be a little better. You have the discretion to continue rooting for the Flames and the Oilers, and I don't know about the Jets, probably a little tougher. But that's my advice. I'm not a big hockey fan, but just root for the Jews. You will feel better.
I would agree. I think, there's some debate over who the most Jewish NHL team is. This is probably something we could save for a later episode.
Sure.
But boy, I really think that we don't have necessarily a Jewish theme of any, the Canadians, not necessarily all that Jewish. Senators, for a long time, I think Senators weren't really allowed to be Jews in this country. We've got 2 teams that are called Canadians in Canada, Vancouver and Montreal. So I guess those are both Jewish. I've
made
Jews
my pitch for Vegas.
Vegas.
Vegas is a Jewish sports team, given Las Vegas's origins as a, being built by Jewish money to a certain degree.
Exactly. I think, if you sort of embrace the anti-Semites say, a sort of a reclaiming thing. The New Jersey Devils, with multiple Jewish players, are a very good team to root for as a Jew, I find. Or if you want to go for some trafe animals, the Seattle Kraken will be a really good,
sure.
You support the animal because you don't want to eat it.
Yeah. So that's our NHL preview. Again, I encourage you, Canadians fans, to put down your flags and raise one for your tribesmen instead. Moving on to the NBA, just quickly, there's not really a lot to talk about. Obviously, someone we've talked about at length before, Denny Avdia, who's the third-year Israeli player for the Washington Wizards, is back this year for another year. He has had a relatively slow start to his career. Averaged 8 points a game last year. Hoping to make a leap. I mean, but certainly the Wizards have lots of room to do it. But unfortunately, he has a groin injury that's holding him out of the lineup right now. I think the feeling is that he's going to be back relatively soon. So keep an eye out for Denny Avdia. He hasn't played yet. Like, he hasn't played any preseason games or anything like that. But hopefully he'll be back soon and be able. He might have a starting spot on the Wizards lineup. Not really predicting that they're going to be a particularly good team.
He spent the summer playing for Team Israel, where I believe he did hurt himself.
Yeah, exactly.
And that sort of, it sucks that he's going to miss some NHL time, but he was fighting for his country, so we're all happy for that.
Yeah, so look out for Denny Avdia. There were no, as far as I know, Jews drafted in the NBA draft this year. I don't even think there is, like, usually we like to highlight, like, this guy, especially during a draft, like, it's kind of exciting, like, this guy sounds like he could be Jewish kind of thing. But this year, like, I was just looking over the NBA draft roster before, and there's not even, like, a lot of guys who sound like they could be Jewish. Like Malachi Branham may be the only one. And I'm pretty sure he's not Jewish. So that's about it. That's all I got. I mean, maybe David Roddy, you could say, like, sort of sounds like he could be Jewish, but I have no reason to believe that he is. And
there aren't a ton of them.
Minnesota, so I don't think he is. So if anyone's aware of other Jews in the NBA right now, we should say that one of our favorite Jewish athletes, Amari Stoudemire, was previously coaching with the Brooklyn Nets and is not back this year. I don't know why or what the reason for is exactly, but he's not going to be back with the Nets. I mean, they are a bit of a dumpster fire, or at least they can be. So who knows? Maybe he's just getting out from a toxic relationship kind of thing.
I hope so. I hope he's, both happy and stays friends with Steve Nash. They have a really wonderful relationship.
Yeah, he seems to be doing really well, and good Instagram follow. I would say Amari's Instagram is mostly just like making wine and studying Torah and like other, brand ambassadorships and stuff like that. He seems like he's living a very nice life.
That sounds absolutely lovely.
So that'll take us to the end of our, NHL, NBA, MLB postseason previews. Why don't we go now to our interview with Avi Feingold?
Hi, I'm Meredith Shiner, and I'm the host of a new podcast from Tablet Studios called The Franchise: Jews, Sports, and America. In this limited series, I'll be talking to journalists, athletes, professional sports nerds, and more about the intersections of contemporary Jewish American life and sports culture. This show tackles the big questions like, do we still need Sandy Koufax as our icon? And are the Mets the most Jewish team in sports? And are sports just? But really, it's a show that uses sports as the prism to explore the most pressing issues for American Jews today, from identity to justice to assimilation or lack thereof. The show is serious and fun and serious fun, and I hope you'll listen to The Franchise wherever you get your podcasts.
We're joined tonight by Avi Feingold, rabbi extraordinaire and host of the CJN's podcast, Bonjour Chai. Hi, Avi. Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course, anytime,
Yeah, we've granted you some temporary reprieve from a cold Montreal sukkah in the middle of the night in October.
it's weird. Like as a rabbi, like you see these guys like Sandy Koufax doesn't want to work on Yom Kippur. It's the nicest, most beautiful thing in the world. But as a rabbi, you try to take off for Yom Kippur, and like, it doesn't work.
That's your World Series. That's your pitching in the World Series is Yom Kippur.
Yeah. Pretty much. But I don't want like, I don't have aspirations to be like the on the mound guy. I don't know. I totally different. My dream is to be more like, I don't know, the Bill James of the rabbinic world. Let's bring hard statistics.
Right. You want to know your
is there a wins above replacement for a rabbi?
Well, of course.
Prayers above replacement?
It's the MKR. It's the MCAR. It's the minutes of Kiddush above replacement. Right? Like how little, right? Come on. Like I think these search committees are just like, it's like the scouts in Moneyball. They're just sitting there like, my gut tells me that this rabbi is the right one.
Yes.
Like, no, you need a plus minus of like, how many leniencies versus stringencies.
That would be a very good
rabbi,
bit.
Like yet another statistic.
Yeah, that rabbis should show up instead of like a traditional resume or talking about their interpretation of the text, just being like, last year I hit 375 on bar mitzvah accuracy. My students did not miss a word. Like just get really statistic with it.
Yeah, and it's about balance. You got the right team, right? So you have the hippie rabbi, but you need the hardcore cantor that's like really focused. Right. Who's going to, you got to worry about salary caps.
Match the Q scores.
Absolutely. So like this is not existing in the rabbi world, in the clergy world, right? We need to bring real math and statistics to the Jewish thing. That's
do a little mitzvah ball.
Absolutely.
Mitzvah ball. Ooh, that's a good one.
Well, Avi, we wanted to have you on, and we should say that you're the first rabbi who's joined us on our show. We wanted to have you on because we talked a few weeks ago about the burgeoning sports gambling scene. Certainly in Ontario, every other TV ad during a game is sports gambling. I'm not sure what the legal status is in Quebec yet, but I think as every province is sort of moving.
We have pari-mutual. We've had it for decades. Right. I remember like Miso.
But that's like pro line. Like that's
exactly. Minimum 3 games, whatever it is. Yeah.
But one jurisdiction after another, sports gambling is getting legalized, and people are getting deluged by it. And I think people are trying it for the first time. And we made some jokes about the names of some of the companies.
Yeah, Jamie mentioned earlier that it's a very, if you look at a lot of the synagogues, they're very gambling focused. We've got Bet Tzedek and Bet Shalom and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's
better than I was actually recruited to go to Congregation Ohave Kesef, right? The lovers of money, but I was like a step too far.
So the question that we wanted the rabbis' input on is, what is the Jewish view on gambling? What is the halacha around it? And I guess from a maybe not religious but ethical standpoint, is it something that Jews should be participating in?
So I'm not sure if you're aware, but this actually goes all the way back to at least 2,000 years, right? So clearly people have been gambling for quite a while. There's actually a Mishnah about this in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, which is like the legal procedures and how courts are established and witnesses and, all of that happens, in a courtroom. And right away, one of the first things that is discussed is who is disqualified from bearing witness, right? What disqualifies you from being a kosher witness? And the first thing that is listed is hamesachek bakubia, right? One who plays with dice. So dice rollers are a problem. And then the next thing after is lending money with interest. And then those who fly pigeons, right, is another part of the category. So
Mike Tyson can't be a witness in Judaism.
No. So
probably
no,
for
it's
all
actually,
of those reasons.
It's pigeon racing, not just pigeon beautiful
so maybe you know the history better than me, but this is probably the history of 2,000-year-old pigeon racing in Canaanite time. Seems like it would be a good story for the Menschwarmers. Perhaps there is a very famous pigeon racer from the time who embraced Judaism.
I don't know. There's a famous episode in the Bible already where David, in the book of Samuel, sorry, it's not with David, but in the book of Samuel, you have this war with the Philistines, and they're afraid of they recognize early on that if they go to battle, a lot of people are going to die. So each side takes their 15 greatest men and decide to go one-on-one combat. And then they ended up like it's everybody, they ended up being totally tied, and whatever that discussion is. But there's clearly an awareness early on that sport becomes the proxy for war.
Did any of the witnesses of that battle have a perfect bracket by any chance?
Oh, that.
We don't know what the action was on that.
It's an archaeology.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody's carved it into a cave somewhere.
And they're like, what does this mean? And what's going on? And like, it just takes some sports guy who is not like, the archaeological intern goes, no, dude, that's a bracket. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's a bracket. It's Mensch madness.
Mensch madness.
So just to dive into that,
to go back to,
portion.
So the Sanhedrin. So basically the idea is, and the Talmud then goes and tries to figure out what is these cases about, and then the later commentaries will then go and delineate and like what are the limits of this, what are the extent of that. It's fascinating if you're into legal theory. The upshot of it, basically, according to most authorities, and in the modern era, you can even see in the conservative and the reform responsa that discuss this, is the idea that if you earn your living either by doing something which is completely by random, right, which is like dice, or if you, even when it comes to pigeons, if you train them and you think that you're going to be able to like race the pigeons, and I guess that's the precursor to horse racing or dog racing or whatever it is, that would send out pigeons and whoever would come back first. So if this becomes your primary occupation, then clearly you are you're not a contributor to society, right? And that is right. Who thinks that they are going to make a living on something which is purely a game of chance?
Right.
And at that point, that's when the rabbis start limiting the discussion. Well, what if you're not doing it for, your living? What if you're just earning, you're not earning based on that. You're just having fun. It's an evening's entertainment and, some enjoyment that you hang out with friends and you do your thing and you go to the casino. Does that count as, gambling or not? Or is it purely based on that? And then in the current era, they'll even go and expand it beyond that to, you have these discussions of people who speculate in the stock market, right? Especially when it gets to day trading and really like advanced, when you get to options and, all of these puts and calls and stuff like that. And they're like, most people don't know what they're doing, and if you earn your living based on that, that might potentially be considered gambling. So that's where the discussion is. So that's broadly speaking where this discussion comes from, and is there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a few questions, and I think maybe I am acquitted to ask some of this because I am a lawyer, and I know this is the legal aspect of things. So is the prohibition on being a witness, how serious is that in terms of a disqualification? Is that like a little, slap on the wrist? Okay, we can't trust this guy as much as anybody else, or is it saying like this is not a someone we want to associate with?
So that's interesting because it doesn't forbid you from doing it, right? It doesn't go and say God forbids you from gambling, right? It's not a sin in that sort of sense. It's not in the criminal code, right? As something that is forbidden. But if you do it, right, you are forbidden from taking part in this, right? Imagine somebody who gets, disbarred, right? It's not a legal, I guess it's a legal category. They can do whatever they want, right? They haven't been punished by society, but they are no longer permitted to do certain things and have this level of trust, right? Sometimes you lose your ability to be bonded for some job or another, right? So think about it.
It sounds a little bit more like a regulation than a law, if that's a distinction that makes sense here. That it's not cut and dry. I mean, obviously Judaism has lots of laws that are very prescriptive. Thou shall not.
Exactly. So that's what I'm pointing out.
If you do this, then you can't be a witness. It doesn't seem quite as severe.
Yeah. The flip side of it is you can say that it's even more severe because this is one of the times when you're punished by society, right? As opposed to by God, where society goes and says, well, no, you cannot witness in court, right? If you witnessed a murder, your witness is, your testimony is automatically disqualified because you're one of those people that is untrustworthy.
And then I guess the other main question I would have is similar to what you brought up with the day trading is a game of chance like dice. Is that the same as a game that requires some skill? So
I was also wondering this.
From a legal perspective, people have used this argument specifically in relation to professional poker playing, and I think have been successful. They've been successful in saying that this isn't a game of chance. I'm a better poker player than most. I'm a professional. I can do this, and I certainly think the same is true of sports betting. There are sharps who make enough that they cover the vig and can make a living sports gambling, not taking advantage of arbitrage or anything like that, or luck. It's just that, they know the odds. They can handle it better. Does that change it from that sort of dice game to being something else?
Yeah. So that discussion is there because it's really not that far off from, as I said, from the stock world, where anything can literally happen in stocks. And so it kind of is still a gamble, but if you know what you're doing, you're not doing that. And most people who aren't, right, the obvious bets are bets that you don't make a lot of money on, right? I'm not going to get rich betting that the Maple Leafs are not going to win the Stanley Cup this year. Right.
And bought me a new patio umbrella.
There you go.
Anyone willing to take the other side of that action is they're just they're the schlemiel and the schlemazel.
Yeah, I remember like from pari-mutuel betting where you would have to you pick your three games, and there was always that kid who was doing it because it's Quebec. You can do whatever you want. That you would go to the Lotto Quebec counter and they'd be like, yeah, you want to play on 3 games? Yeah, sure. We don't care if you're 13 or you look 15 or whatever it is. And there's always that kid who's like, oh, I'm going to pick the lowest possible odds for 3 games in a row and I'm going to win. And I'm like, great. You put down $2 and you won $2.60 or
right.
$2.23, nobody's getting rich off of that. And so I think that what it comes down to is the people that really spend all of their time as sharps looking for all of these angles. And there's so many. There's a whole season actually of Gamblers, which is a Ringer podcast. And if you've been listening to it,
I haven't listened to it, but I know the podcast.
About sharps in Vegas and the people that sit there and work these
I thought you were going to say a whole season about Jews.
No, no, but yeah. And I guess, you hear this and you admire it, but then you say to yourself, well, how are you contributing to society by spending your entire day looking for these angles to try to make money?
Right.
As opposed to doing something constructive. And that's where the rabbis would go and say, you may have some sort of intelligence on this, but what have you done? What is the measure of your days? And so again, may not be illegal, but what is going on here? And I think that, when you're dealing with covering the VIG is very different from so much of what happens now in sports betting where, the coin toss and is the first play going to be, a pass or a throw? What's
right.
the score going to be at the first quarter, right? The thousands of bets that happen at every possible moment, that to me is where it's really up to chance.
Mm-hmm.
And, what are you doing? And are you doing this for fun? Or are you doing this because you actually want to earn a living? I was reading about some rabbi who went and said, you shouldn't even be joining a rotisserie league or doing your fantasy, pool. And I'm like, I disagreed with that. And I'm just a guy. I'm not
sure.
Mr. Super Rabbi or anything. But in my mind, there's a fundamental difference between putting $100 down with 10 friends and, creating a league, a fantasy league, that you're actually getting more enjoyment out of that $100 that you would get out of your 4 months of Netflix, right? You're
right.
really getting to enjoy it. And that's part of the enjoyment is saying, yeah, I might win off my friend something, but it's really more about the actual week to week and day to day of the trades and
it creates a certain amount of camaraderie, community.
So in that sense, there's a difference between the guy who's doing it just for fun or going to even the casino and playing roulette just for an evening and saying, I'm okay. I'm not addicted. I can easily go 2 years without going into a casino. And when I go in, I bring $100 and that's all I do.
We should point out that interestingly enough, both the guy the guy who's considered to be the creator of rotisserie baseball, Daniel Ockrent, is Jewish, of course.
Yeah.
And I think some of the most prolific gamblers in American history obviously were as well.
Mostly ones that had to do with sports.
mostly Arnold Rothstein fixing the World Series. I think we could go and say that there's something about fixing a game, fixing a competition that would probably fall pretty squarely within, I don't know, bearing false witness or stealing. That's pretty directly.
So let's bracket that and say that that's actual cheating and that's actual theft.
I would argue
people that are honestly going for it.
I would argue that the sports gambling and the fixing of the World Series was probably not the X factor in whether or not Arnold Rothstein was going to make a living. He had plenty of other what do we call it? Illicit dealings as well.
Sure. It's like the tax evasion for,
Exactly. That's not what the World Series is not what's disqualifying him from bearing witness.
If we're going to get the guy on, withholding confidential documents, top secret documents from the Justice Department, if that's what it's going to take, to put a guy away, then that's what it's going to be.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I think
hypothetical, total hypothetical.
Total hypothetical. It has nothing to do with anything.
It is interesting though, because I do think about the speculating side of it as well, being such an interesting thing where it's like, you read stories, I forget the guy's name, but he was called like Sam the Banana Man, who like cornered the fruit trade in New Orleans back in the early part of the 20th century. And it's like, that guy he just played the numbers and figured it out better than anybody else and speculated on it. And I think, ended up being the equivalent of a billionaire back then. But I guess but it was also for some good purpose. I mean, you need speculation on commodity pricing, or things don't get grown and things don't get sold.
You also make sure that there's no insider trading there, and then the whole point of the market and the market regulations is to make sure that speculation doesn't turn into fixing, and you don't have that, or we try to make sure that we don't have that in sports.
Right.
That it's as free and fair as possible.
And that's the same rules, I guess, any sort of fixing inside of things, that goes beyond the getting an edge or something like that. That's just, prohibited stealing, theft, lying, whatever you want to call it.
And remember that the entire purpose of sports, if you ask me, right, in modern society, is that it's the only entertainment that nobody really knows the outcome to. You'd never bet on the ending of a movie.
Right.
Because somebody knows the ending. A lot of people know the ending of the movie, and it would be silly to go and think that the person you're betting with might not be one of those people.
This is how I feel about spoilers. That I think there should be no. If you can't watch it on time, then you deserve to get it spoiled, because the statute of limitations on spoilers is maybe 24 hours, because it's not like it's a thing that is unknown. Everyone is aware of what happened. Society doesn't have to bend to you. Sorry, rant over.
Well, no, come on. I mean, look, the whole purpose of the Torah, right? We're coming up on Simchat Torah. I don't know how far ahead are we.
It's a great tie-in.
It should be. This should be coming out just around Simchat Torah. Yeah.
Done. So Simchat Torah.
People should listen to this episode after finishing the Torah, but before starting it again.
Because what happens at the very end of Simchat Torah, of the Torah itself?
We start all over again.
Yeah, but what happens at the very end?
Sorry, at the end of Simchat Torah?
Of Vizot HaBracha, the last part of the whole Torah, right?
Okay, what's
what happens?
What happens?
The last major event, Moses dies. Right now, Gabe is like, no, spoiler!
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We do it every year. we go over it every year. And the fact that we start right away at the beginning means that, like, hey, we should, okay, there's no spoilers in the Torah. There's always, that's the same thing, and it's the same idea, Go look at the ending. It's not going to kill the beginning, and it'll still be interesting.
I can see the show notes now.
There is no spoilers in sports, because you never know what's going to happen.
No, I can see the show notes now of saying, Gabe and Jamie and Rabbi Avi Feingold discuss sports gambling. Also, Avi spoils the Torah.
Yes.
So we have another question we'd like to get to.
That's the only problem. You see, that's the whole thing that happened with Christianity, right? We're mad at the Christians because they spoiled the ending that the Messiah showed up. And we're like, no, don't tell us that. He's still supposed to be here.
That's the thing about Jesus. He's just a spoiler.
Yeah. Gabe, sorry, you said you had another question you wanted to ask?
Well, we also want to discuss, it's recently started in the season, Avi, and are you a football fan? And yes... Yeah, sorry, you finish first, and then we'll ask the question, the rabbinical question.
Are we talking Canadian football or American football or global football?
I would say the gridiron football.
And not the Canadian version, not the one where you can get a rouge.
I think that's still gridiron. That counts as gridiron.
It is, but I mean, as soon as you get into meters and three downs, we're not dealing with the same level of violence as you're dealing with in
That's a good point. That's a very good point. So that's excellent you put that in. The level of violence is something that has obviously come very clearly to sports fans and sports writers recently in both football, hockey to a lesser extent. They seem to have made some changes, but it's still an issue. So is there a rabbinical decision, Rabbi, on whether or not violence for entertainment is ethical?
It's weird. It feels like it's such a no-brainer that I can't think of.
You can say no. You can just say no.
No, I'm just trying to say, like, hey, maybe some rabbi actually talks about that. And I'm trying to remember, maybe it's totally blanking on me. Maybe I'm right in that it's so obvious that nobody would even bother to go and talk about this. But violence as a spectator thing is probably something that is frowned on in Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's... I think that if a sport is done in good fun, and even when it's played at the peak of its, people that are really working all day to show off their physical prowess and show how good they can be, the best sports occasionally have things which get physical. But I would say that if it's more incidental to the nature of the game as opposed to the very purpose of the game itself. Right. So it's like, are you watching NHL or are you watching, Shoresy or any other like scrappy major junior hockey?
Yes.
Where half of the game is pretty much like the purpose of it, and people are only showing up for the fights.
So so you're saying it's very unlikely that Rabbi Akiva would like watch some people fight in the street in Tiberias for fun.
Yeah, I can't imagine that was, especially because remember that we were probably the ones being thrown to the lions, right, when you had this violence for sport.
Sure.
And so we probably have a little bit of trauma from that.
Avi, I thank you so much for your time and for joining us. I think we have a pretty good understanding of where we stand from an ethical perspective. Gambling, okay. If it's just a hobby, if it's fun, probably okay.
I didn't talk about ethics here,
Yeah, that's true.
This is like Rabbi Kristofsky. Rabbi, should I buy a Cadillac?
But Rabbi, does Proverbs not say that dishonest wealth will dwindle? But what is
Rabbi? But does Videotron not offer full coverage all over the island?
Yes.
Well, thanks so much, Avi, for being here today and talking about the Jewish perspective on gambling. I think this is something that Jewish sports fans are going to have to be increasingly aware of as sports gambling continues to take a solid foothold.
Anytime.
Well, thanks again to Avi for joining us. First rabbi we've had on a show, Gabe. First, hopefully not the last. We'll need to get some other rabbis on at some point.
We're becoming, a real pulpit for halakhic discussion. It's very nice.
Maybe the next move is to have a cantor on to I don't know, to sing
our Jewish sports songs.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, the cantor that I want to have on, of course, is the announcer for soccer around the world, Andres Cantor.
Yes, maybe the most famous Jewish cantor there is. We should look at getting Andres Cantor. That I guess you could say that guest is a pretty big goal for us. Good. With the World Cup coming up in a couple of weeks, we can get our production team on that. I'm pretty sure he's reachable.
Wow, the World Cup really is starting soon. We should think about some content for that. Andres Cantor might be the only Jewish element in it. But we'll have to look. We'll have to look a little deeper and find some other stuff. And
I got a couple of ideas. We got some ideas for you people brewing to get there. There's a lot of Jewish soccer players we could talk about. Maybe some we can interview. Talk about their World Cup experiences.
Sounds good. Until next time, you can find our work as always at the Canadian Jewish News website, thecjn.ca. There's a Canadian Jewish News page on Facebook, and of course our Twitter. Our Twitter is always happening with news and hot takes on Jews and sports and whatever else is on our mind. And you can find that at Menschwarmers, at least until Kanye gains access to the platform and goes DEFCON 3 on us. As always, we're executive produced by Michael Freeman. And thanks so much for being with us. And please like and subscribe to our podcast wherever you go.
Join author Karen Levine in marking the 20th anniversary of the extraordinary true story behind her beloved children's book, Hannah's Suitcase. You'll hear how the curator of a small Holocaust museum in Japan wound up on an incredible global journey, searching for a young girl named Hannah Brady. Sunday, October 30th at 2 p.m. at Beth Emmet Synagogue in Toronto. To learn more and register for free, visit beby.org/event/OCT30.